So today is November 17th, 2021. The time is 5:10 p.m. and I am calling to order the Baldwin Park City Council special meeting. City Clerk, can I have a roll call?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Daniel Damian,
Here.
Councilmember Monica Garcia,
Here.
Councilmember Paul Hernandez, Councilmember Paul Hernandez,
So I'll make a motion to excuse Councilmember Hernandez. Can I get a second?
I believe he's on YouTube.
Oh, there he is.
Thank you. I'm here.
Okay, thank you.
Technical difficulties.
Mayor Pro Tem Alejandra Avila and Mayor Manuel Estrada.
Here. Thank you for that, City Clerk. At this moment, we move on to public communications. City Clerk, is there anybody looking to speak?
We have no one on over the phone, so no.
Great. And then if there's anybody looking to speak now regarding anything on the item for the special meeting, now is your time. And looking that nobody is looking to speak, I will now move to close the public communication. And I believe that we have a open and study session regarding the Cesar Chavez Foundation Affordable Family Housing presentation.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and City Council. Good evening. Tonight, we've asked the Cesar Chavez Foundation to return and continue the discussion regarding their proposed affordable housing development along Ramona Boulevard. They made a previous presentation about 6 or 8 months ago. It took some time for them to revise their proposal, but they have done so in response to the council's comments and about the project. And so what I'd like to first do is ask Ron Garcia, who is not present, so I won't ask Ron Garcia. But you might have not known that the meeting was going to start. So, but in the meantime, let's ask Cesar Chavez to come on up and start their presentation. I just wanted to mention that before they start that the project has submitted a preliminary application to the Planning Division, but we still have not made a formal application for entitlement. But the design you're seeing tonight is essentially the final conceptual design, and we're seeking your input and guidance on it as they proceed to the final and official submittal to the city. The project, however, as similar to the other retirement affordable housing project, the Retirement Housing Foundation, which is on the other side of the Metrolink station, this project also will fall under the density bonus guidelines from the state and will be streamlined. It will essentially be an administrative type of approval. It will not be required to go to the Planning Commission or the City Council because of the the state guidelines for affordable housing. So with that, we will, Ron, yeah, we're good, Ron? So let's ask Cesar Chavez Foundation to begin the presentation. And we have a PowerPoint with a video.
Is better? Yeah. Good evening. My name is Steve Hernandez. I am the Director of Business Development for the Cesar Chavez Foundation, and I thank you for meeting with us today and also seeing everyone in person rather than Zoom. I know we've talked in, I think, May or March timeframe about the initial project, and we're excited to come back and go through the efforts of working with staff and hearing your feedback on moving this project forward. Next slide, please. So this is the agenda we're going to go over quickly, just over of the foundation itself, and then how that we're broken down into our housing economic development, how we're structured, and then update you on the proposed project that we want to present today. Next slide, please. Just an overview of the Cesar Chavez Foundation. It was founded by civil and labor rights leader Cesar Chavez. to help the farm workers advocate for more better treatment and fair wages. And amongst that, he's also started up a series of social enterprises and pillars throughout the foundation. So not only do they have economic well-being and financial well-being, other support systems to help out the farm worker and the movement of that. So we set up a series of different pillars throughout the organization. And one of the pillars he set up was the National Chavez Center, where President Obama has declared our headquarters, which is a historical national landmark, and where we maintain his legacy through different streets and parks that want to use his name. We go ahead and make sure that his name is not tarnished, and we have the representation of all the people who fought and supported the movement is still well respected all throughout the Southwest and national wide. So we keep that foundation. It's a fund that we maintain and we hold true to our heart. Additionally, he set up a different fund, which is the educational fund. And within that fund, in every one of our developments, we have what we call a CSIP Weather Learning Center, and where we partner with different school districts. We have after-school programs because we found on a lot of our properties, a lot of the students are behind in either education, but particularly math and English. So we really focus on those two pillars to make sure that we are able to enhance their capability and to be productive in that component for their after-school program. So every one of our developments, and this development will have a CSIP Weather Learning Center for the community and the kids in our development. The other fund that they started was the Communications Fund. And within that fund, it's called a Radio Campesina. And in that fund, we go ahead and Caesar not only to give entertainment for the farm workers, but he also to give out the information of notices of different actions that's happening, stuff that we need to get their rally behind, of movement information, but also inform of the farm workers of what's going on in the surrounding local, national politics that really directly affect them. The second fund is the Housing and Economic Development Fund. And that's the fund that George and I and our development team work for, and that's where we do developments all throughout the Southwest. Next slide, please. I'm going to go into the Housing and Economic Development Fund. Next slide. So the Housing and Economic Development Fund is vertically integrated, which means that we control all aspects of development. So unlike other developers where they just develop and they have an off-site construction person, property management, asset management, Cesar Chavez was not only a great leader, motivator for civil and labor rights. He's also was and make sure we have managed control because the promises that we've made and the community that's invested in the foundation is there for long term. So that's why we are vertically integrated. So we control all development process from construction, finance, property management, compliance, and long-term ownership. So we're long-term owners of our property. We do not build them and sell them off to the highest bidder to make a profit. So that's why we're long-term owners. So anything we promise the city and the staff, we're here for the long term. Additionally, we operate in the Southwest, which is California, Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. And we have a little over about 5,000 units throughout the Southwest. And we have over close to 2,000 units that are in the works within the different region that we concentrate in. Next slide, please. And here's our overall in-house experience. Like mentioned previously, is where we control all aspects of development process. But also, before we get into the project specifics, I wanted to make just to let everyone on how this development is going to fit in with the community on the financial aspect and who the residents are going to serve. So right now, Baldwin Park, their median income is about $51,700, but give or take, with the average average household of about 4.1, so we just say around 4. So this development is going to serve within with the median income of LA County is $118,000 for a family of 4. And for our residents, for this population we're going to serve between 60% to 30% of the area income. And what that means is we're going to serve families making between $70,000 all the way down to $35,000. So it's in that range of that target population where we are now in terms of who we're going to serve. And the rents are going to, from the 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms of the rents are going to be charging from a low side for 1 bedroom for a family of 4 of $665 to $1,330 for a 1 bedroom. And then for a 2 bedroom, from $798 to $1,596. And then for a 3 bedroom, it'll be $922 up into $1,844. And it's always between that 60 and 30% income range, which are usually your lower workforce housing, which we found to be a lot of the medical assistants, factory workers, retail component, and that type of sector of who our population better serves. So I'll be followed by George Lopez and Steve to talk about the project specifics of all the different design aspects that we went through from about over a year of being working with the city and staff. I'm hearing the comments from that.
Thank you for having me. My name is George Lopez. I am the Director of Project Development. Next slide, please. Just to recap where we've been over the last year, we're an affordable housing developer, and we've had a previous relationship with some city staff, and we built some successful projects in the past. And so we saw this as an opportunity to hopefully do another great project. And we came across this site off Ramona, just down the street. It's currently a commercial business that's been operating for some time, and then it has he did own 2 single-family lots behind there. This site is a very definition of where you want to place affordable housing. Because of the next slide, please. Because of the access of different site amenities, particularly the transportation priority zone with the Metrolink station. You have other, you got public education, parks, grocery stores. So when we first came across the site, we saw this as a great opportunity to locate multifamily housing for different affordable housing incomes. Since we're new to the city, technically, with the introduction of the new state laws, we don't have to go through the planning commission process, the city council process, but we still believe ultimately this is a partnership. These projects are too complicated not to have city support and staff support. Ultimately, we'll be dealing with up to 4 to 7 different agencies, whether it's public agency, investors, and lenders, and they all have different requirements. And these projects are too complicated unless we have strong city support and staff support. And ultimately, that's the reason we're here. Next slide, please. And so we had a open city council session back in March of 2021, and we introduced the proposed project at the time, and we gathered the comments from city council and modified our proposed project. Prior to this, we were proposing under the state density bonus laws an 80 unit development across 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. We since then reduced the total number of units by 23, almost a 30% reduction, and we chopped off a floor and made it from 4 stories down to 3 stories. And so there'd be buildings that are 3 and 2 stories, and also we increased the parking ratio from 0.96 to 0.11. Next slide, please. And so now I want to introduce our architect, Onyx Architects, and just to go over some of the details of the before and after architectural changes to the proposed project.
Good evening, Council. My name is Steve Kuchensky. I'm with Onyx Architects, and I also have Daniel Sanchez and Eric Martinez from our office here tonight. And I'd like to just start off by pointing out the previous design that you saw back in March. And as George said, we had a combination of 4 stories and 3 stories. We had been working with an entry off of Downing Avenue that went to a subterranean parking structure. And one of the things that the fire department had been pressing for at that time was an access point off of Downing, and then to have our longest facade be completely accessible to fire trucks. So thus that created the long elevation here. There was, at the time we were studying the potential of turning Little Ramona into a plaza, and would be accessible to pedestrians instead of vehicles. Based on the feedback that we got, we felt that keeping the parking was a priority. Let's go to the next slide. I want to show you how it changed over time now. We've relocated the fire department entry down to this driveway, so the fire department can bring their trucks into here and then access from here. They can access from Downing, and they have all this access on Ramona. So we were able to take care of those technical aspects. In addition to that, by reducing the density, you can see now that we have 2 stories on the north next to the residential garden RG zone. We have also pulled the building back a little bit from the commercial retail areas to the west. So with that, you see that we have the greater side yards. We have the building keeping the street parking along here. We do have our main entry in this area. And I guess I would describe our design as representing a series of transitions. In one sense, you have it transitioning between the zones, between the RG zone and the specific plan area. It's transitioning between downtown and more residential uses to the north. It transitions between the existing specific plan and some of the discussions that we participated in on the future specific plan. And then lastly, as you'll see in the coming slides, the architectural style itself is transitional between commercial and towards the residential looks that you see towards the north. Next slide, please. So again, you can see that we have a series of 3-story elevations facing Little Ramona, and we have it stepping down to 2 stories as we go northwards towards the RG zone. And then in addition to that, as it rounds the corner, we open the building facade up by stepping down here to 2 stories with a rooftop terrace with a trellis. That enables light to come back into the courtyard, which we'll be seeing in the upcoming slide. We have introduced pitched roofs here so that it begins to develop kind of deeper overhangs on the facade to create a nice roof line edge to it. And yet we also have kept some flat areas behind that for the state-required solar photovoltaic systems. Let's continue to the next slide. So here's the view from Ramona Boulevard. And again, you can see it begins to function as a transition. We anticipate that future commercial development will have be more of a parapeted roof situation. And again, we're keeping it to 3 stories. We brought down the 4-story height there. We have a driveway that separates us from the neighboring property. And then you can see the development of a series of parapet and then a pitched roof and then a ladder, more of an awning type roof over these balcony pop-outs. And then the important thing to note here is that as we come towards Ramona, we have placed all of our non-residential uses, our recreational functions and community functions, our leasing offices and supportive services, our lobby, they all face along Ramona so that it retains more of a commercial feel. And then it transitions as we go on to Downing. Only when we're on Downing do we get the residential apartments. So we've really kind of kept it a commercial transition on a Ramona Boulevard site. Let's continue to the next slide. Again, we're starting to take you around the corner. This property line does a big sweep, of course, and the Metrolink comes right across the intersection. So you can see here again how our roof lines are modulating up and down to provide a visual interest to the site. And here you can see that as we get to the dwelling units, we're at the first ground level, which are just in this area, they start to elevate up about 3 feet so that those people's patios aren't right on the sidewalk there, but are set up and have a sense of privacy. Let's continue on to the next slide. So again, we're just continuing around. You can see that it transitions from the more commercial look towards a more residential look appropriate to the neighborhood to the north. Next slide, please. And this kind of gives you a close-up view of the various materials that we're considering. See wood siding, you see exterior plaster, and then we have a series of treatments of various trellises and decorative railings. The patios are all deeply inset and balconies so that we have solar shading summertime. Next slide, please. So this is a view from above looking straight down into, we have an interior courtyard, and though there is subterranean parking, we do have tree wells, so we're able to get some kind of more lush landscaping in there and a play area for children. And then up here you can see 2 stories up, we have another deck that captures sunlight all year round and provides a view out towards the intersection. Next slide. This is a fly-through video just to give you some general views. So let's go ahead and start that. Hopefully it will go here. So here we're on Little Ramona, and we're just going to zoom you around. And here you can see that deck again, our recreation room. This will just be a series of vignettes. There's our courtyard and tot lot area, different views from inside. Our interior community room and the view out towards the intersection. By stepping down the floor elevation here, we're able to get much taller ceilings, again, more appropriate to a commercial function. And so our recreation room both has views out towards the intersection, but it also opens up directly towards the courtyard. So we can have an opportunity to connect through the indoor recreational space and the outdoor recreational space. There's a view from that second floor deck looking down into the courtyard. Different angles looking at that same central courtyard. Again, you can see the roof line modulates up and down through the use of the balconies and the pitched roofs. This is a side passageway that then leads to the center courtyard and provides a pathway for fire department access as well for firefighters, should that ever rise. Once again, a view of the courtyard, patios and trellises, barbecue area, picnic tables. And play area for the kids. And the important thing, of course, placing it here is that then there's supervision passively through all the other common area spaces that are on the first floor. Here's another view at that rooftop deck. And we would anticipate this probably more, not so much a tot lot play area, it's more of a grown-up and passive recreational area. It's sun all year round and has great views towards the intersection. We're still working out the details with staff as to how we would landscape this area and what kind of amenities we will ultimately have up here. But this gives you a general idea of transitional style, as I mentioned. There you can see kind of a more contemporary trellis, yet we also have some traditional roof lines along here. And I believe that is the rest of the video, so I'll turn it back to Steve.
just to recap, next slide, please. Just to recap, just to show that we are a long-term partner, that we're seeking to continue like that relationship with the city staff and also with the council and the community at large. Is we're long-term owners. We did purchase the property already. We did take the feedback from the originally suggested proposed that we have with the density bonus law, and said let's work together. We understand that the city's still working through their housing element and specific plan updates. We did participate in some of the task force meetings with I think Kaiser and his group, and got feedback from those participating in those meetings. So we are here to bring more spur economic development in the downtown corridor, but understand that we are a little bit ahead of the game, and that's why the design aspects have some type of. It's not all one set design. It's kind of different aspects of materials, elevation concepts. So when the council does take final action of adopting a specific plan for the downtown area, we're able to adapt and overcome different aspects of what the city and the community at large would prefer. So we do have that ability to adapt our project for that component. And then also just to making sure have this development near accessibility to transit, and then which equals to jobs placement for our residents. Because yes, we do want to provide housing, but we want them to elevate them in their economic stability so they can move on to be homeowners, first-time owners, so we can get the next group of affordable housing families to live in our community. But then also to make sure we have that pedestrian-friendly community on that corner to kind of expand that specific plan and your downtown area. So pending any questions, if you have any questions, we're here and open to take any questions, comments, concerns, and stuff like that. So
Well, I want to thank you for taking City Council's considerations into this. It looks really nice. I think it's really good, and I like that you are well aware of what the city needs and the needs of the community, right? So you're aware of our median average, which is something that we've been talking about a lot. We're making a lot of efforts in the housing and security field. I like that it's very family oriented. I don't want to keep sending you back to the drawing board. I think it's very nice, but I would like you to just kind of keep in mind, based on the history of Cesar Chavez, and you're actually right across the street from a very important mural in the city of Baldwin Park. I'm not sure if you visited, but it's very it's a big representation of where the city comes from. I think there might be room for you to in your aesthetics, potentially some public art that pays tribute to Cesar Chavez as well.
Now most of our developments have murals, and then we would want to incorporate. We want to make sure the style is okay before we could definitely go out. I know you guys have a public arts commission, or start working on that and where that placement is, and then how do we select an art piece. But we're definitely open on all our developments currently that we're moving forward. We do have some art pieces as a part of our development overall. So that's definitely something that we will do when we submit to the. So just the placement on where it is, we're open to suggestions on where that can
be. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely your project. I think it's a great opportunity, right, to add a little bit of more history to the downtown and complement the mural and obviously complement the legacy of Cesar Chavez. So thank you for being here today. At this point, I'll pass it on to Council. Mayor Pro Tem, did you have a question?
Just a comment, thank you. That is a beautiful rendering. I really like all the amenities you have put into that project. Very family oriented, like the mayor said. Do you have actual pictures of projects like that to kind of get a better idea of the design? I mean, I could see the design, but like an actual picture of the materials that are being used?
I definitely we could provide some of the inspirations of what we have of prior projects, or inspiration of where they pulled it from.
Mm-hmm.
As you can see, most developments, as you can see, maybe the one across the street, it's just usually one aspect of one building. You could tell it's one building. This one we try to break it up, mm-hmm. so it's not a sequence of one just mass apartment. There's break it up in a series of of flows and avenues. But do you have an example?
Yeah, I would like to see, so I can take a look at the person. It kind of personality it gives us.
I didn't bring specific examples tonight, but we definitely can come back or present you some material samples and those kinds of things. And we're going to continue to work with staff to refine those details, because that's what really makes a building.
Right. We want it to stand out, not to be. It's hard to tell in the drawings, so it's not so plain, and it just stands out as a nice project. But it's nice as it is.
Well, thank you.
I just would like to get a better idea of what it actually looks like with the materials that you're building. But thank you for the presentation.
I think a part of our submittal, I think Ben and Ron will require us to do a materials board on that aspect when we do, more refined elevations for your review. So we'll do that, and then we'll send it to council as well.
Mayor,
Yes, Councilmember Garcia.
thank you. So did I hear George Lopez?
Yes.
Yes, but not the
Okay.
comedian.
Okay, well, thank you, George, for that presentation. It actually looks really good. I think that the changes that you've made really make for a nice project. And I just wanted to ask a few questions. First of all, the balconies, I saw that those were open balconies and they do look nice. Will there be rules about any personal items on the balconies?
Correct. Yeah, balconies tends to be an issue sometimes if it's not regulated. People start putting their belongings out in the balconies, and it can become an eyesore. But part of our lease-up addendums will include what you can and can't have in the balconies.
Okay, and that will be strictly enforced, right? Because it is along Ramona Boulevard, one of our larger corridors.
Yeah, all our projects has that requirement, have those requirements.
Okay, great. And then can we go back to the screen where the rendering of the building, any one of those renderings, maybe the front? Okay, that's good. So I thought the colors were nice. They look very like natural landscape, California. They're a little muted. And so I wanted to ask you your thoughts of adding some decorative red brick, perhaps on the bottom level, maybe near the ground level, something like that, just to have a little bit of, the combination. I think it would pop a little bit.
I think Steve's probably the better one to answer the question, but ultimately, part of our planning submission process is to dive deep into the elevations, the materials, and ultimately we'll take direction by staff, what staff suggests.
So what I'm suggesting is to include maybe some red decorative brick, not the bright, something that would go with this palette, but that would add more color. Because I feel like what we're seeing right now is it's nice, but it's very muted. And so, to have a little bit more of some contrast, maybe, that's what my suggestion would be to staff. So Ben, if you can work with Cesar Chavez Foundation and, come up with some suggestions on a palette that works. And then I noticed that you have some landscape, but would you consider like the native landscape, like the grasses, things like that, to really, enhance the sidewalk and the walking experience here?
Yes, we typically do utilize native landscaping, and we actually have been doing just some initial landscaping for the purposes of this presentation, but we really need to get our landscape architect involved so that it all coordinates and ties together.
Yeah, because that would be nice. I see kind of that beige and a little bit of like an earth color. The green looks nice. I think adding the native landscape of greens and perhaps like some red. You know what I'm talking about? Like that burnt red. I think it could really add to the palette that we're looking at and give more character. Since it's along the main corridor, details really can make it stand out.
Absolutely. And go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Well, to your point, I think those colors could also help anchor the building in towards the side a little bit more, in the same way that you mentioned, perhaps a brick or bolder color material towards the bottom. You can see we have almost like a small wainscot around the building at about the 3-foot height level. And again, there's opportunity to really anchor the building into the site as we further develop the
Right. Yeah. And it wouldn't, it would actually complement the area because we do have like the kind of the Art Deco, but also like brick buildings in downtown area. And I feel like this is a little bit Art Deco, but we can throw in some brick. I think it would look really nice, and I think it looks great.
Yeah,
I like the changes that you guys made.
I think ultimately this is going to be like the entry to the downtown. It could be like a monument location where people say, "Hey, that place next to that building where there's a monument sign or artwork, or I think this site has great potential just to open up that downtown corridor."
Yeah, I agree. And the train will be passing through here every day. And so it really is a portal in many ways, right, along the rail line. So yeah, I think it's great. Thank you so much for taking those, suggestions or input into consideration and working with us to produce, I think, what is a nicer project. So thank you.
Ultimately, my viewpoint on these projects is you guys are the client, and I'm just providing a service. And the ultimate goal from my perspective is to provide 53 multifamily units to at affordable housing rent, so that single mom, that single father can not work 80 hours a week. They can work one job and they can take care of the kids after school and be present. So my mindset is ultimately you're the client, and we'll do what it takes to get these projects done.
Yeah, I appreciate the collaborative approach.
Mayor, if I may?
Yes, Councilmember Damian.
Mine will be really brief. Thank you very much, Mr. Lopez. This is a really great concept of what you want to bring into the community. I just wanted to see on Little Ramona, I don't know if you had that rendering, that I think it's that 3D rendering that you had, where it showed that Little Ramona Street on there. I didn't get to catch it. Will you be utilizing the entire Little Ramona, or will it cut off before that shopping center next to it?
We're leaving Little Ramona as is, with just the front part for the landscaping and sidewalk setback. But it's going all the way through. It's going to continue down to the other street signal that's to the west of the commercial building.
Got it. Perfect. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
And I think what we could do as well is when we submit and work with Ron and Ben from the city, when we do our full submittal with the landscape plans, we'll be, I think we could come and present it again to the city, so the city council. So you see, this is what we are submitting, because when we submit, it's a by right because of the zoning. But I think we, as being community partners with the city, we would come and bring it. This is what we're submitting, so exactly what, we took the feedback of like the brick, the landscape, the elevation, and the changes of all that, of the designs that we're going to put. So you see our full submittal of everything a little bit more refined. And if there's more comments, we could come back and do that. But I think we can make that promise to the council and to the staff that we'll do that.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Hernandez.
Thank you. Just for consideration, if it's feasible or something we could look into a second phase for the staff and for the team is, considering, the amount of surface that we have, could we also look at perhaps adding solar panels to the top of the roof place, if that can support it? That would certainly, help offset, some of the energy and, help become a model project in more ways than one. My other thing too is, under the renderings that you have here, you have a lot of grass. My suggestion would be is to go away from grass, because it takes, takes a large amount of water to maintain that. I would look at perhaps suggesting that and changing it to DG or some other, natural landscape. Where again, the water, long-term usage for maintaining the hardscape is a little bit more manageable, not only for you, but also for the rest of our residents, because we're all, in a drought, and we will be for many, many years. So if we can just kind of look at that possible considerations, I'd certainly appreciate it. And then in regards to the trees, again, look at something that's more native, There's Palos Verdes that are really beautiful trees, especially the more mature ones. They're they're very much a desert tree and don't require much, which I'm sure your architectural team will certainly understand those or other similar native plants that could be used instead of what might be currently shown here. But no, looks beautiful. Look forward to the next phase.
Thank you, and I'd like to respond to a couple of those comments. We definitely
Please.
plan on having solar photovoltaic up on the roofs, and typically it makes our project more competitive for funding as we do that. So that's definitely going to be a major part of this project. I would also add that the landscaping that we did was for the purpose of these renderings was somewhat of a placeholder until we got your feedback tonight that you were comfortable with the general direction of the project. But we definitely do drought tolerant and native landscaping on most of our developments. Again, that is, we work for the WELO water efficient landscape ordinance requirements, and that again will help us make us more competitive in our funding applications for affordable housing.
No, I appreciate that. And then just an item for Ben and Sam. Is it possible, as we're, tearing up the streets and so forth and the move towards electric vehicles, could we look at establishing some EV charging stations in some of those parking lots there, while we have the opportunity of, opening up the streets? Because more and more folks, including our city, are starting to use those type of vehicles, and in less than a couple years from now, or a handful of years, that's going to be the norm. So we might start begin to look at that infrastructure, especially if we have streets are opening and there's opportunity to lay some of the infrastructure.
I think our code requires us to provide some EV setup parking spaces, so we will have some of those in our development, in our garage, for the tenants. But also, just to go back to what Mr. Hernandez mentioned about we'll be LEED certified, so we're going above Title 24 code requirements. So we're going to have that as an additional bonus. Just we don't have that here. But as I mentioned previously, once we submit to the city with all our required, because they're going to definitely require us to do landscaping plans, and better civil details and architectural details and palettes and material boards and what we're going to be using. But we'll come back to the city council again just to show you this is the full package, and just making sure that if this is the right path you want us to take, we'll definitely move and enhance this to include the additional features and comments that you mentioned today. And we'll present that at a later time when we actually submit to the city of this is what we're going to present so far.
No problem. And just one last question. Have we done or looked at how the building will affect the shade or the sun towards the neighbors and the homes that are behind it and to the side of it?
We can put that as, I think it's probably required as part of our study to do the shade overshadow, but it's during the north side of the property, they're 2-story massing in terms of height elevation. I think the difference is
Yeah, so as you can see on the north side, the roof is sloping back, especially at the corners. But the allowable height, according to current code in the RG zone, is 27 feet. And with state density bonus law, can go much higher than that. But we're keeping it at the parapet heights right now to 28.6 feet. So we're within a couple of feet of what would normally be allowed.
Okay.
In the RG zone anyway.
I think when we submit, we could put the shadow study that we could do for the northern part residential, family component. Should be no problem.
Appreciate that. Thank you. We'll look forward to that.
Mayor, since we're here, I have a couple of more suggestions. Well, first of all, I do want to say I really like the transitional height of the 2-story, and I think that will complement the single-story neighborhood. And I'm sure that there are 2-story homes in that neighborhood. So again, I appreciate that. Thank you. What I was going to mention is the windows. I don't know if we can look at some options for the windows because they look a little dark, and maybe something that brightens it up a little bit. And then I agree with the mayor that there's opportunity for some art here. And I'm looking at the front, what this corner, I guess, entrance with the beige facade. And I'm looking at the very thin, looks like windows. And there, it seems like there's opportunity to create like a banner type art, from the bottom floor to the top, not all the way to the top, but in that area. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Are you referring to the where the corner rounds the area and the
Yes.
and where we have the trellis and the deck above? It's that
Right.
facade you're referring to?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you see if you look straight in the center of that facade, there are 3 windows, and then 2 windows going,
Yes.
in each direction. And then there are very thin windows. It looks like very like slits.
Oh, yes.
And so what I'm saying is perhaps there's an opportunity to look at something vertical that could cover those slits, and, be art. That's just a suggestion. Just in the interest of time, I might as well just share it with you this evening versus waiting for it to come back and delaying the project further with it, additional ideas.
Yeah,
But
we definitely appreciate that, and in fact, as we consider doing art, we typically start coordinating with the artist early on to think about what are the areas around it, so that it really showcases the art and doesn't try to fight it.
Right, you don't want to hide it with these trees or things like that. So I agree. So those are just my additional comments. So thank you again.
Again, then just to go on the windows itself, just because of the sound, our windows are going to be a little thicker than the average unit because of the sound barrier and the vibration and stuff we need to abide by through code. Also, that's going to be that by the windows have to have that extra layer of reinforcement.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Great.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being here today. Hey, so one more question before you take off, because I think we're all excited that this is a family focused. You're aware of the median income, and then you've also touched on the rents. And so I think one of the issues sometimes we see, like recently we saw somebody who lived in an affordable complex, but the rents were going up and up because of CPI and whatever other abilities they have to raise the rent, that they end up getting priced out of that. So how does that, does the Cesar Chavez homes differ in a different way, or,
So how it works is usually when they get qualified at a certain income, say they get, income qualified at 30% AMI, and then through their successful outreach programs and then financial planning, they're able to pay off some of their bills, since not all their rent is going, financial and money's going to rent, and they could increase, and you could continue to go above what the percentage of those rents are, up to I think 80% AMI, to where we're like, okay, now kind of have to adjust for your income coming in, because we have to certify every year that, number one, they're working, the household side is still there, they still have a job, and make sure the income qualified to what percentage that we underwrote the project for. But there's different fluctuations, because there's always, there's some vacancies that come across that we could look them into. Okay, now they're at a 40% AMI unit, we could put them in that unit there, and then just mix and match the different AMI levels. But right now, just for underwriting purposes, we do an increase of 2%, which is usually lower below. So 2% to 2.5%, depending on the funding criteria that we're going to apply for. So we're going to go after county funding, state funding, and also federal low-income housing tax credits as well. And usually their requirements is from 2 to 2.5.
Good.
And just to add one more thing, this project's unique in the sense that we already applied for vouchers, and we awarded vouchers. So ultimately, it's 30% of their income. So if they got a promotion or something happened in their working situation, whether it's them paying $300 or $100 or some kind $0, it's 30% of their income. We won't have that issue on this specific project.
Great. Well, thank you. I look forward to that. Thank you. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
So at this moment, I'll hand it over to our city attorney. City attorney, I believe you have a presentation for us today.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to give a presentation regarding the rent stabilization ordinance and some proposed changes to the rent stabilization ordinance. And by way of summary, on December 4th, 2019, the City Council adopted ordinance number 1447 to temporarily freeze rents for 120 days in the city of Baldwin Park and prohibit certain residential units from rent increases in excess of 3% in any 12-month period. And it would also regulate the reasons landlords are permitted to terminate certain residential tenancies. Essentially, that would be called just cause evictions. In order to address some concerns of residents and landlords to clarify some provisions in the rent stabilization ordinance, the council directed staff to make some changes to the RSO. The city attorney's office made those changes and brought those changes back to the November 3rd, 2021 council meeting. At that time, the city council requested some additional changes, decided at that point not to adopt the changes that were made on November 3rd at that time, but they still are included in the one amendment that is before you today, that will be before you today in open session. The city council requested the inclusion of multifamily units, condos, trailer spaces, and single-family homes into the RSO and directed staff to research the legalities and restrictions tied to those changes, including mobile homes. I did make those changes and we'll have something in open session to present to you, a modified ordinance that the council will be able to take action on tonight or make other decisions as well. The city council originally adopted an urgency ordinance number 1447 on December 4, 2019. That was the original ordinance that temporarily froze the rents for 120 days in Baldwin Park and prohibited certain residential units from rent increases in excess of 3% in any 12-month period. The previous changes to Ordinance 1447 were proposed by staff to address essentially typographical errors and to add further terms to strengthen the ordinance. The new and additional terms prohibit landlords from raising or instituting new fees for services that were included in the rent previously, such as water, electricity, and parking, in order to circumvent the new proposed rent increase cap of 3%. And the reason for that was we found after we adopted the original ordinance that in order to raise the rent above 3%, some landlords were attaching fees for water that was normally included in the rent before the ordinance, parking that was normally included in the rent before the ordinance, or utilities or some other fees. So we sort of close that loophole for landlords so that they couldn't just add additional fees and not call it rent and still end up raising the rent well above the 3%. So that was included in some of the changes that was brought to you on November 3rd. The ordinance did also have a separate eviction freeze at that time, not an eviction freeze, but only a rent freeze, also called a rent moratorium. This previous rent moratorium ended on April 3, 2020. However, the city enacted a separate emergency eviction freeze due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. And that local eviction freeze brought the city in line with the statewide emergency order. That statewide emergency order was related to evictions ended on September 3, 2020, as did the statewide emergency order as well. However, LA County has now enacted a rent freeze ordinance that applies to all incorporated cities in Los Angeles County, including the city of Baldwin Park. So there is currently a rent freeze and eviction freeze in the city of Baldwin Park based on the ordinance by the LA County. The fiscal impact to the city is, we have registration fees for these dwelling units that are covered under the rent stabilization ordinance. They generate approximately $40,000 to reimburse the city for portions of staff costs. The changes that are being suggested are on attachment 1. There are some changes that I'm going to be making in open session to what's actually in the ordinance because they were mistakenly added here and because I think that it would be more in line with the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act and would prevent future challenges to the rent stabilization ordinance. On section 129.01A, originally it had certain residential units before 1995 were covered by the ordinance. In the ordinance that you will have in open session, it says it moves that to the year 2000. I'm going to correct that in open session. That will stay at 1995. So according to the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act, that will stay at 1995. So it'll be all residential units built before 1995 will be covered under the new rent stabilization ordinance, and that's the same as the original. So there'll be no changes as it relates to that. On section 129.04C, landlords were directed to look at the change in the CPIU as a guide for which they could raise rent with a cap of 3%. Now, instead of having a flat cap of 3%, the new ordinance will have a cap of 3% or 80% of the CPIU, whichever is lower. So, for example, if the CPI is 3%, then the cap would be 2.4% because 2.4% is 80% of 3. If the CPI was 4%, 80% of that is 3.2. But the lowest of the 3.2 and the 3 is the 3, so it would be a 3% rate increase. So essentially what this does is it changes the rate increase to be a maximum of 3%, but it could be lower depending on whether or not the CPI is above 3%. If the CPI is, say, 2%, then the maximum increase will be 80% of that, which would be 1.6%. So before it had a flat cap of 3%, now it's 3% or 80% of the CPIU, whichever is lower. Section 129.04, if the consumer price index is any number less than 1%, the landlord may increase the rent to 1%. That's what we had previously. If we adopt the new ordinance that's before you later on today, that would change because now if it's less than 1%, like let's say it's 0.5%, well 80% of 0.5% is 4%. So instead of it going up to 1% if it's 0.08, it would go to 0.04. So it changes that slightly based on the 80% of the consumer price index. So rather than anything less than 1% going up to 1, anything less than 1% will be 80% of that. Section 129.26, we had single-family homes and mobile homes and duplexes were automatically exempt from the provisions of the ordinance previously. The new ordinance, and I'm going to add some additional language to that just to clarify it, but the new ordinance will include single-family homes. However, it will not include homes. Let me get the language for you right here. It will not include homes. I'm sorry, I had it here before. Okay, residential real property that is alienable separate from the title to another dwelling. So that's the language that we'll use that will be exempt because under the Contra-Hawkins Rental Housing Act, there are some single-family homes that are exempt from rent control under state law, and that definition is residential real property that is alienable separate from the title to another dwelling. So, but it is rather an open question regarding single-family homes. So, for example, if you have a single-family home, even though it's a detached dwelling unit, if you've got two families living in that home, then that would not be included in that exemption. So that could be rent controlled. There's also an open question related to if you have a single-family home and you have two adults living there that are not married. That's an open question about whether that would be covered under Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act and whether or not it would be exempt under state law. So there are some single-family homes that can be rent controlled, and that would be the residential real property that is alienable separate from the title to another dwelling. So I'm going to include that language in the ordinance that you'll see later on in your open session. In addition, mobile home parks established before 1990, they will be included in this new ordinance. However, it will not be included, mobile homes before 1990 will not be included if the mobile home has a long-term lease of over 12 months. And again, that's in order to bring us in compliance with the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act. That really is the main state law as it relates to rent control. So it does indicate that there are some things that you can rent control and some things that you can't. So in order to make us compliant with that, I'm suggesting these small changes in the ordinance that you have before you in open session. That concludes my report regarding the changes. Oh, yes. Well, multifamily homes, of course, have already been included, so we're not changing that in any way. Multifamily homes will, of course, still be included. I meant to highlight the changes that we're bringing to the ordinance, but to be clear, multifamily housing is still included. So that concludes my report related to the changes, Mr. Mayor and City Council. If you have any questions or anything that you'd like to go over, I'm open to that as well.
Great. Thank you for that, Robert. So at this moment, I'll open it up to the council. If you have any questions, concerns.
So when we want to make revisions, we're going to do this in open session then, correct? Not now?
Yes, Councilmember Damian, I'm going to make those suggestions in open session. And then if there were to be a motion related to this first reading, then I would ask that the motion include the changes that I identify in open session in the motion.
Got it. Okay.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yes, Councilmember Hernandez.
Thank you. The last meeting that we were at, the majority, stated, if I remember correctly, please correct me if I'm wrong, Robert, that we were going to take the time to notify our residents that are being impacted by this type of ordinance. So to have this ordinance in front of us now, especially with all these changes that are being proposed, I have great concerns. Because one, I don't have, a piece of document that shares with me what those changes are. And more importantly, our residents and rental properties don't have also the opportunity to chime in and to provide feedback. Now what I've done in the past, when I first authored the rent control ordinance that we adopted that our attorney mentioned, I went out and brought in the apartment association to obtain their feedback. I did it also with the Realtors Association to get their feedback. And then staff also sent out mailers to the property owners, making them aware that this was happening. So again, I don't understand where the transparency or the lack of transparency is happening as a city level. Because again, the items in which the draft was presented to us clearly was not in line with what the state law is. And in fact, there are a couple of things that I want to understand a little bit more before we even move forward on this. One is AB 1482. That is something that the governor, instituted, became law and became effective January 1st of 2020. And that provides protection already to single-family homeowners throughout California, including the city of Baldwin Park. So where does this lie along with that, Mr. City Attorney and staff? And I have other questions because, again, now under this current proposal, you have multifamily homes, right, the ones that we added the first time, where they're now being penalized once again to be not able to recoup their costs for running their business, because that is what running a business. And the other thing is, what I don't have in front of me is how big of a problem are we talking about? How many rental homes do we have? There's a lot of things that, I have a lot of questions, and I'm not certainly going to take the time to do that right now, because again, we still need a lot of more information that I haven't even begun to ask staff on before I could really understand what this is. And, I'm someone that supported and introduced and authored, as our city attorney will talk to you, meeting with public counsel for our last ordinance that provided the most protective ordinance for our residents in our apartment units. But we also did that with care, with working with the apartment owners to understand, how our ordinance also provided them the flexibility to be able to run their business and maintain their business. So that way our tenants would not be inadvertently affected by something like this. Considering that the cost of insurance, home insurance, is going up every year, costs of the valuation of property taxes are going up every year, regardless of what of this year's happening. And more importantly, the fact that residents of our city are going to be financially impacted when they sell their house, or if they try to rent their homes, are going to be financially impacted that we haven't even done a study on. So to do and to add and to shove something like this down their throat, I believe is just absolutely shameful on all of us to be even having the discussion at this level with a draft ordinance. And, you know, I'll wait till 7 o'clock to further go at that point. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mayor, if I may?
If you don't mind, Councilmember Damian, I do have a little bit of information related to AB 1482, which Councilmember Hernandez had inquired about. So is that okay if I just mention that very quickly?
Go ahead. Yes, definitely. Go ahead.
So under AB 1482, that is correct that that's a Tenant Protection Act. It expires on January 1 of 2030. It requires a landlord to have a just cause in order to terminate a tenancy. It limits annual rent increases to no more than 5% plus the local CPI or 10%, whichever is lower. It has a tenant may not waive their rights to those protections in any agreement or anything of that nature. Covered units under AB 1482 include all units constructed prior to the last 15 years. Units that were constructed within the last 15 years are not covered. This applies on a rolling basis, so each year that goes on, that 15 years starts over again. Affordable housing is not restricted. Dormitories are not restricted. 2-unit property, provided that the second unit is occupied by an owner of the property, is not included. And single-family homes and condominiums are only exempt if A and B apply. If the property is not owned by a real estate trust corporation or LLC, and if the landlord notified the tenant in writing that the tenancy is not subject to the just cause and rent cause limitations. So AB 1482 is a Tenancy Protection Act, and those are the major points related to that.
Robert, I have a question for you. Let's say, for example, I purchase a property in the city of Baldwin Park today. I close escrow, and my mortgage payment is, with all costs factored in, I'm paying a total payment of, let's just make it easy, $2,000 a month, just for numbers' sake. I can in turn rent or lease that property out at $4,000, $5,000 if I wish, correct?
If you buy something today and it's never been a rental unit before?
Correct.
Well, yes, because whatever you started that rent out, that would be the base rent, right? Because there is no base under our ordinance. The base rent is whatever the rent was 12 months before. But if it's never been rented before, then you would establish that rent, at the time that you buy it. Correct.
And because I'm looking at properties that are currently rented now. There's about 11 properties. The average cost per rental is about $2,700. But you've got anything from a 2-bedroom, 1-bath apartment at $1,850 a month, all the way up to about $3,600 a month. So if I'm going to get into the business of now becoming a rental investor or an investor renting out properties, I'm going to make sure that when I purchase my property and I close the transaction, I have my numbers in line. So if I'm carrying an overhead cost of $2,000 a month, then I'm not going to go and rent that apartment or that property for $2,200 a month, because I know, number one, profitability. Number two, I got to look at what homes are being rented for in the area. And number three, I want to make sure that I'm not going to be tied to this 5% cap and shoot myself in the foot and start low. So if you just come in and buy that property, you're going to be able to rent it at whatever price you want. The cap is just going to be set moving forward, correct?
As long as there was never a rental unit before. If it was a rental unit before, then there is going to be a base rent, and it will be covered under the ordinance, and that base rent will go back to 12 months before you bought it. That would be the base rent.
Got it. That's what I wanted to clarify. Perfect. Thank you.
Mayor.
Yes, Councilmember Garcia.
Thank you. Well, I think at the last council meeting when we had a discussion on this item, we said we were going to be thoughtful. We were going to take our time to research, to look at other cities, to look at state law or any other, law that would inform us on how this would impact our community. I think it's irresponsible that 2 weeks later, we have an ordinance and we haven't considered the implications of this ordinance and how those implications will reverberate in our community now and in decades to come. We have no idea. So how are we going to make a decision tonight without being informed? That's irresponsible. And I want to say that when I scan our community is mostly single family home, owner occupied, and our residents are mostly Latino. These are families that are probably immigrants and have struggled to achieve the American dream of home ownership. And tonight, 2 weeks after we've taken up an item, we're going to start stripping that away from them. I think that's very irresponsible. I think that we really need to ask ourselves, why are we doing this? Why are we moving so quickly without being informed, without making intelligent decisions? Because why, if you ask me, it's because this is it's a hot issue at the moment. And I get that, I get that some people want to be at the forefront of being very progressive on this issue, but we haven't thought this through. We really have not thought this through. My concern is, let's say we do have rent control on these single family homes, and how is that going to impact the family that wants to sell their home? We don't know. Can somebody tell me, anybody here, can you tell me if the property values will be impacted in this community with rent control on single family homes? Anyone, please take your turn to inform me about this.
I can actually answer that question for you, Councilwoman Garcia.
Oh, please. Okay.
So, there's multiple cities throughout the state. Can you point to one where there was a massive news break where any property values went down? It seems to me that we're starting to politicize this issue and we're starting to throw out misinformation. Property values are not going to go down. They didn't go down the first time we passed an ordinance, and they're not going to go down again. They've never went down. They're not going to go down this time. It seems that we're politicizing this. The city council had the opportunity to pass this 2 years ago when the old council was here, but they didn't do so because some of those council members made money off of being a landlord. So, this idea that you were transparent about this, that's also a lie. Because I sat there in the audience and I saw multiple apartment associations come in here and say that they were never aware of what was going on. So this isn't about politics. This is about looking at our community. Homeowners are not going to get affected if they're in the property. So again, another misinformation. We can keep talking about this at 7 o'clock, but that's case in point. This idea that property values are going to go down, that people are going to lose their investment, it's not going to happen. That's the same thing that certain individuals were trying to make rumor about regarding our tiny homes. Hasn't happened, never will happen. Major cities have this. It's not going to happen. Look at this. Is the ordinance we're following is actually inspired by Santa Ana, one of the most expensive cities there is out there, and they are fine. So, I think we just need to be honest. If you don't want to support it, that's fine. But to sit here and politicize it, we just don't have time to keep beating around the bush. Families are hurting. You just heard Cesar Chavez Foundation talk about our median income. I always talk about it. I always say it's less than 60,000. They're saying it's barely over 51,000. A family of four in LA County making $100,000, low income. We just have to be honest about what's going on here. For far too long, this city has prioritized gentrification and displacement of Latino families, by the way. So, this argument just doesn't sit right with me. So we can keep that going. By the way, we've all been here. Councilmember, you've been here 14 years. Councilmember Hernandez, you've been here 2. Mayor Pro Tem, you've been here 2. Councilmember Damian and I have been here almost a year. At this point, if you don't know the housing needs of your constituents, I don't know what to tell you. City council meetings are not the place where you come to get informed. They're where you come to ask minimal questions and make decisions. But you should be looking at your agenda since the day it gets posted. That's what we're here to do. So if you don't know the answer to these things, I don't know what to tell you, but it's not on me.
Well,
Council
we
members
don't
are
have the
individuals. I'm still
answers.
talking. Council members should be doing what they need to be doing. They should be doing their homework. I answered your question. The better yet, can you point to a city where property values have died out in the housing crisis of where we're at? where there is a scarcity of housing? And the answer is no, you cannot, because there's no such thing.
Okay, Mayor, you've provided your opinion, but I'm still uninformed. I'm still uninformed on the impact, on case studies, on what other cities have done specifically, how it compares to this ordinance. Again, I need to know, I need to understand public policy implications and impacts to this community. Your response, I'm sorry, it does not inform me of any of that. So for me, I'm not prepared in any way, not because I come without, preparation. I come asking for us to be thoughtful, for us to really think through public policy decisions that will have implications. And what are those implications? And have we weighed the pros and the cons across the board? And we haven't. One thing is to have an opinion on a policy. The other is to actually look at where has it worked? Where has it been implemented? We're not looking at any of that information. So I'm not ready. There are too many families in this community that have put their life savings into a single family home and to achieve that American dream. And I'm not willing at this point on this day to start stripping that away from them, because we don't know what the resale will be in those homes. I know I have known of rent controlled properties that if you look at the property value as it stands today compared to market value, there's a significant difference. I don't know what that's going to look like for my community, for the Gonzalez family down the street, when they're ready to sell their home, what that means for them. And so I'm not ready to make any decisions on this, and I'm not going to even consider the ordinance that's before us today.
Mayor?
Yes, well, you know what, Councilmember, it is 6:30. Mayor Pro Tem, it is 6:26, and we do need to go to the closed session. I believe that this conversation will be best suitable for 7 o'clock.
I'll just make it really quick. I just want to add that there is a lot of owner-occupied properties here, and that will not be affected because their owners, they are occupying the property. These are for rental properties only. That actually affects renters that will be impacted with rent increases coming out of a pandemic. Some are barely getting back on their feet. And I know a lot of families that are renting single-family homes, condos, that have already approached me. And they're afraid of the impact it will make. So I think it's a great ordinance. It's not going to devalue our homes or affect owner-occupied properties. Thank you.
Great, so at this moment, we will recess to closed session.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anybody in the audience, we would request that you please exit the room. We will come back and adjourn at 7 o'clock. The council will be going into closed session. Thank you.
It'd be nice to get everything upgraded, though.
Oh yeah, it'll be a huge weight off a lot of people's shoulders.